Today we are in Canal Fulton, Ohio, about 20 minutes south of Akron. There's nothing like the charm of an old canal town. And if you want to know what small town America looks like, this is a great example of that. Canal Fulton has its share of legends stemming back to the early 1800s when this canal was being built. We're going to touch on some of those legends today. Today's video is a series of spooky tales that harkens back to the early 1800s. So, if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. As early as 1787, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson discussed the desirability of a canal system that would link Lake Erie to the Ohio River as part of a national system of canals. On July 4, 1825, ground was broken in Newark, Ohio for the construction of the Ohio Canal, creating a waterway transit system for goods to be transported in and out of the state. Several small towns popped up along the canal, taking advantage of the new traffic and the money it brought in. Canal Fulton was one of those towns. So the old saying is that for every mile of canal, there is a dead Irishman buried. And that's kind of in part to the strenuous labor that it took to build the canal, mostly by hand. And most of the workers were Irish immigrants who built this canal. The canal workers received a pittance of pay, usually somewhere around 25 cents a day. Not a lot of money, not even for back then. They did get to eat. They were fed mostly beans and bacon and potatoes. And let's not forget their jigger of whiskey that they were allotted every single day. So you can imagine the type of men who worked on the canal, what it was like to live the way they lived in their shanties and their tents, and just how strenuous life was for them. So when they had a chance to let their hair down, as it were, when they weren't working, remember it was 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, the nights became a kind of raucous, and there were a lot of fights, I guess, as the old-time Irishmen used to do. As a matter of fact, the local law enforcement attributed 90% of the homicides to canal workers. When you talk about the canals, and especially this Lock 4 on the Ohio Canal, you have to investigate the paranormal. And this lock right here is essentially the coup de grace when it comes to the paranormal. You have to consider that most of the deaths that occurred near this canal happened because of malaria. You had still and stagnant water, you had microbes, you had poor living conditions, poor sanitary conditions, poor diet. All of that led to the unnatural deaths of the workers here on the canal. So there are a lot of spirits, supposedly, who wander this area because they left this plane when their job wasn't done. The Canal Fulton Public Library was originally built in 1897 as a mortuary, replete with a crematorium. And that was a necessity in this town due to all of the deaths from the canals and the murders that happened downtown. Legend has it that janitors working in there to this day hear ghostly footsteps, see chairs move, shadow figures, you name it. Could be the spookiest place in all of Canal Fulton. Brimstone Corner, as it was formerly known, was the seedy part of town in the early days. Today, Archangel Tattoo occupies what was once a saloon with a second-floor brothel. English and German citizens often found themselves at odds with one another, and fisticuffs would ensue. Sometimes these altercations ended in fatality. If you had the money, you could buy yourself out of a crime. There was a tunnel below the saloon that led across the street to a mortuary. If you paid the mortician, he would burn the corpse for you, and you could make your getaway. No body, no crime. Built in 1901, the Blank House used to be the old Chamber of Commerce. And when it was the Chamber of Commerce, the secretary used to have long stints in the building by herself. And at times she would hear disembodied footsteps. Now, there are plenty of times when she would actually get up and investigate the footsteps, knowing full well that she was alone in the building. And of course, she never saw a soul. The Sisters Century House, while it's now a restaurant, used to be the location of the Mortuary. You remember we talked about the saloon and how there was a tunnel running underneath the street from the saloon to the Mortuary. That building was the Mortuary. There are several spirits that are said to be haunting that location. There's a naked woman and a young child who like to creep around in the upstairs and peer out of the windows. But the last spirit that gives rise to the most attention is one that likes to touch people. The legend has it that a server in the restaurant went down into the cellar to get some ice. While she was down there, she was slapped on her rear end. When she wheeled around to see who played such a naughty prank, you guessed it, she was alone. That server never went down in the basement alone from that point forward. The old Pioneer Cemetery was built back in the early 1800s, and it's filled with babies and children. A lot of German immigrants are buried here as well. According to beliefs at the time, bodies were buried facing east-west so that the spirits of the loved ones could sit up and watch the sunrise in the morning. However, if a body happens to be buried north and south, it's believed that that is because the person buried in that grave was a witch. Wonder if there's anybody buried that way in this cemetery. It's hard to tell. So the legend has it that in 1857, the lock manager found out that the lock was going to be closing. As a matter of fact, because of the rail system that was in place, locks were going to become unnecessary in the state of Ohio. So plenty of people were going to lose their job, but this particular lock foreman was very unhappy about it, and it seems that he may have lost his faculties a bit. So upon hearing the news, he went insane and went on a rampage and killed several lock workers and then himself. What's grisly about it is his method of execution. He used acid, if you could imagine. He had a jar or a vat or a barrel, that's unclear, but he had acid. He went around and poured it on the workers, and whatever remained in his vessel, he poured it on himself. The worst part is, none of these people died immediately. They all had painful, long, gruesome deaths that led to eventually the hauntings in this area. As a matter of fact, the screams and moans of those who were killed here from that incident, they say can still be heard along this towpath trail. And it's also said that the lock manager to this day refuses to leave his shed that he occupied. Many paranormal researchers believe that ghosts linger because of a job that's been left unfinished, or it could be because of all of the unmarked graves littered about along the canal. Whatever the reason, you should visit Canal Fulton for yourself. I'm sure you'll have a hauntingly good time. Thanks for watching today, folks. If you would please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I love hearing from you. And I'll see you next time as we explore more curious history. Take care.